Further discussion?
So, what you just said though is not what our charter says now. What if some, well, let me ask you this first. What does the intent of the charter say? The intent, in my opinion, says that we hold this election to put the two seats. So maybe you feel like we should change the charter and have 5 seats. That was brought up tonight. If that's the case, fine, I'll live with whatever we go with. But in the confines I have is 7. And what if, God forbid, something happened to you? Steve now becomes mayor. We have 4. He can't be overridden. And say I don't like something. I just don't show up at that meeting. We can't vote on it. I mean, that's just not the way this is set up to do. And we have a constitution that we have, and you're judging, saying that it's better for the city to save this money than to have a representation. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as like, we need to fill these seats. And the people that we can find $200,000 savings to get this, but we can't give back to people's rights to representation that they so rightly deserve.
Further discussion?
Well, I fully respect your opinion, as we have both said, you can argue either side of this, and I believe you're right in that regard. I'm just trying to manage, effectively look at this as a business decision that we need to make, how you can best manage the costs and other aspects of this with the risks. And I just come down on the view that I'm confident we can mitigate risks and work through the process. I'd much rather spend $200,000 on any one of several dozen items, not the least of which would be repaving neighborhood roads.
So you're saying the costs are more important than rights? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying as I think about the 3 questions or the criteria that I'm reflecting on: quality of the election, nature of the decisions, the quality of our ability to represent the interests of the city in governance. I think about all of that.
The nature of the decisions, we have some pretty big decisions coming up. And that, I would say, would throw that argument out. There's some big decisions coming up with the future of our city.
Further discussion?
Well, I'd just like to, address the point again, not to repeat, but, we've heard from some very vocal people here in the city council meetings through the public comment process. But again, we've got a large group of citizens out there, and I can't say those 716 people are the same people that always vote, but it could be equated to a statistically valid representation of those people who vote. And those people, voiced their opinion to delay it to November. So I'm up here in support of the people who took the time to respond to the survey and took the time to, make comments, pro or con, to, holding an early election over in November.
That's why I'm waiting until November. We're told we're supposed to listen to the people. We had so many emails, and I just can't even vote for it earlier than November.
I agree with
because
that.
of that.
Sorry. I agree with the comments, but there's 46,000 registered voters we heard from. And I'm not discounting that. I agree that in general with that poll, that people would say, no, I'd rather not spend the money. I would rather not spend the money. But we saw an email today with someone who went one way and they've changed their mind saying they want the representation. I just, if you're going by that, I think that's one way, and that's your right to do that. And look, we can agree to disagree. But if this was, like I said in there, if this turns out to be a 3-2 vote, 2 seats could make a difference on this. I agree we should. I would rather not have to be in this situation, but I am, and when I really think about what this is about, it's about people's rights to representation, and that's what our charter says. And I cannot, this is what's been troubling me, I cannot get comfortable with not giving them that right. This is what.
I also am incredibly disappointed in the number of our residents who don't take an active role in the minimum responsibility we have as a citizen to go out and vote. I think it's embarrassing that we've got voting percentages in the single digits. 2,500 votes in a town of 82,000 is embarrassing. I don't know what to do to get people more engaged. I did everything I could in the past election, and we still had a relatively small number, granted much larger because it coincided with the primaries. But again, if we hold a special election, we're going to have those same small numbers, 2,500, 3,000, 4,000 at the maximum. At least if we wait till November, we'll have an opportunity to potentially double that, maybe get to 8,000 or 9,000, 10,000 voters. And maybe I don't know what kind of communications plan we can put together to get more people engaged, but I think a November election gives us more of an opportunity to not only get more people engaged, but also get more candidates, higher quality candidates that have the opportunity to prepare, run a quality election, run a quality campaign, and ultimately deliver to us, the best representation of the council that we can get.
So,
But we're gonna have an election in November regardless. I mean, so we're gonna have those numbers. You guys chose to run with a year left on your term. There's people out there who would love probably the opportunity to run with that. I think you have a leg up if you win that election. So it may not even be that much more cost. I've made my point.
and I think you've made it well, Lenny. I mean, I don't think that regardless of the outcome of the vote, first of all, I want to thank the council for a respectful debate. I also want to thank the council for a debate, which I'm going to weigh in on in a minute. There is no right or wrong answer. I disagree with the statement. There is an answer to this. There are answers that go along that align with opinions. There is a history, if I just go by the history of the city council in the past, and that doesn't mean that the council was right or wrong in the past, but they have been consistent in that the two opportunities that they had when this situation came up, they delayed the election, and you can look in the minutes, the statement was always about cost. So that's the history. In fact, in 2010, when we did it, Alpharetta had the exact same situation come up at almost the same time for a different set of circumstances. Then Councilmember David Belle-Isle resigned to run in a three-way race for state senate, which he subsequently lost. He later would run and be elected to mayor. At that time, their charter was even more specific than ours. Not only did their charter have the same language we had, their charter went on to say that they shall call for the election within 90 days. It didn't say they shall hold the election, it said they shall call for the election. And despite that additional language, they waited, skipped 2 elections, and went to November. That was the exact same time that Liz Hausman, then Councilmember Hausman, resigned to run for Fulton County Commission. So, as it relates to intent, I mean, that requires that we know the minds of those who wrote the charter. And as close as I feel like I was to the authors of our charter, I still can't tell you what their intent was. I think if their intent was very clear, they would have made it very clear. I think in those things like the millage, they were very specific. And in fact, when I questioned them after the fact, they said that they were absolutely intentional in the way that they did certain things. So I'm not going to say they weren't intentional, and I'm not that it wasn't their intent. I'm not going to say it was their intent. At the end of the day, I have to rely on a couple of things. One, do I think the city council can effectively operate, whether it be between now and March, or April, between now and June or July, or between now and November and December? And I asked each of you whether you were committed to make that happen, because no matter what our decision is tonight, we still have to deal with it for some period of time. And you gave a commitment that that would be the case. Are there risks? Absolutely. I think there's risk with everything that we do. As it relates to the veto, I will specifically state it here now. The intent, I know this, of the way I use the veto is as an absolute backstop to protect this city should a council make a decision that I am later advised, later being before the next meeting, by our attorneys and our staff, that there is some hugely detrimental impact on the city should I allow that decision to continue forward. And in those instances, I would absolutely veto that action every time, and I would hope that regardless of whether we're a full complement or not, that veto would not get overridden. That said, in 8 years, I have thought about vetoing 3 actions, and I can state them exactly. One that never occurred. I threatened a veto of the council because I didn't think that it was appropriate for us to be treated as employees and be given benefits in our very first council meeting when a couple of council members suggested that they wanted to institute full benefits, including retirement, to council members. And I said, do it, and I will veto it immediately after our first meeting. That was the first time I contemplated a veto. I contemplated a veto a second time on a matter that I felt like the council would actually be breaking the law. If they did it, they didn't do it, I didn't have to worry about it. The third time I actually did veto, and that was when the council took the action to waive attorney-client privilege. I had a number of attorneys, something in the neighborhood of 16, prior to me seeking actual counsel from then outside attorney Carruthers, where he also said that they should not have waived attorney-client privilege because of other impacts that it would have on the city. I then vetoed it, I gave all the reasons in my veto message, and they overrode that veto. I commit to the council, regardless of when the election is held, should I need to do a veto, and the four of you come back and you say, we're gonna override your veto, even though legally you would not have the number of votes to sustain it, I will vote to override my veto unless I am given strong advice by our city attorney that that would have a deleterious impact or a detriment, severely detrimental impact on the city. I just understand what the spirit of our charter was, and while I think it was a mistake in the way it was written, it did not contemplate the reduction of two people at the same time, and that is something that I do think the charter, among other things, needs to be fixed. I think there's a number of mechanical things that we've learned in this process, that we learned in the process that we went through with the city manager, and dealing with that still haven't been fixed. There's just all sorts of what I'll call mechanical issues that need to be fixed in our charter that experience has taught us, and we should get right on that. Although I don't think we'll be able to get it dealt with in this legislative session due to our missing a representative during most of this session. We need to address that. I think we have issues related to the election and the election process. Citizens have raised the fact that there's probably better ways, more modern ways that we can handle this. Some of that is limited by Georgia state law. Some of that is not. And this council can look into that. I think the longer we give ourselves to look into that, that's probably better. Because I think that that will be not only a short-term better decision, but I think it'll be a long-term better decision for the city of Johns Creek if it saves money and gets a better election process, including potentially running it for ourselves, although so far I haven't been convinced that's the right thing to do. Long story short, I would support the November, holding the election in November. If I was going to hold it early, I would actually support June over March, because I believe that at least giving a slightly longer runway than about 7 or 8 days for a qualifying period would be the next best solution. I will tell you, council, that I, like you, I fancy myself as being involved in our community. I'm around our community a lot. I make jokes that I try to do everything that I can inside of Johns Creek and not outside of Johns Creek, although I found myself at Avalon and other places outside the city. And as I walk around and I engage with our citizens, it has been overwhelming as the survey. That's not statistically accurate, but it has been as overwhelming that citizens have said to me, despite knowing about the veto issue, despite knowing about cost issues and representation, that they have clearly said that they would like to wait. As it relates to the citizen that asked whether I would support a reduction in the number of council members, I think I could make arguments in both directions. I will tell you that we've operated quite well at 5 members, and in many ways it's easier to interact with a smaller group of council members. I think that given that we are citywide, I wouldn't be against it. I will tell you that the downside of it is you can look to cities like Snellville, and I apologize, I don't like to call out other cities, where it only then takes 2 or 3 dysfunctional council members, which is harder to achieve as 7 to mess the thing up, but 2 would mess up a council of 5 pretty easily. So, you know, there are pluses and minuses, but I would, I think that we ought to look at everything, at all the times, anything that we can do to improve the operation of our city. Long story short, I would not support this motion. I would support the election in November. And again, Lenny, I don't think that, or of course it's self-serving for me to say that I don't think that it's a wrong interpretation, just like I don't think that your interpretation is necessarily wrong. And I certainly respect all of the arguments that you've made, as I do my fellow council members here on the same side of the issue. Any further discussion?
Sure. Going back, whatever the vote comes out, if we're going to be 5, obviously we'll work together, I think. I think a couple things. If we're talking charter changes with 5 people, that's a big issue. And that's what we're talking about here. Also, I think, for Warren's not in here, but I think we need to really try to,
Okay.
Warren, I think we really need to really look at being prepared to look at maybe not using Fulton County for elections in November. I think this is kind of an issue. I do want to defend our staff, because someone made a comment about the not knowing the numbers. Our staff tried to get the numbers, that was not their fault. The numbers were from Fulton County, and I can attest to that. So I want to back them up. And the third thing is, I'm going to say, and the final thing is,